241,200 years. The number sits heavily on the mind, defying the biological constraints of human existence and mocking the brief flicker of modern history. In the cool, sterile air of the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, a small object rests behind glass, unassuming and beige, no larger than a human forearm. It is a prism of baked clay, covered in the dense, wedge-shaped scratchings of cuneiform. And it holds a claim so audacious that it fractures our understanding of time itself. This is the Weld-Blundell Prism, the most complete copy of the Sumerian King List. It does not whisper of a primitive past, where men hit stones together in the dark. Instead, it screams of a golden age where kingship descended directly from heaven, where rulers sat on thrones for tens of thousands of years, and where the line between the divine and the mortal was not just blurred, but non-existent. These 8 kings, ruling over 5 cities, governed for a combined duration that eclipses the entire history of Homo sapiens, reigning until the world was washed clean by water. To understand the weight of this clay object, one must strip away the modern skepticism that immediately dismisses these figures as mere fantasy and instead step into the sandals of the scribe who wrote it. It is around 1800 BC in the city of Larsa, southern Mesopotamia. The heat is a physical weight, pressing down on the mud brick walls, and the air smells of dust, drying reeds, and the brackish waters of the Euphrates. The scribe sits cross-legged, his stylus poised over the wet clay. He is not writing fiction. In his mind, he is documenting the absolute truth of the universe. He is compiling a lineage that connects his current master, a warlord fighting for legitimacy in a fractured land, to the very dawn of creation. He presses the reed into the clay, and the first symbols form the foundational statement of Sumerian ideology. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. Eridu. The name itself evokes a sense of primal ancientness, recognized by the Sumerians as the very first city, the mound of creation rising from the chaotic waters of the abyss. Here, the list tells us, Alulim became king. He did not rule for a decade, nor a lifetime. Alulim ruled for 28,800 years. Imagine the psychology of a civilization that accepts this as fact. To the people of Mesopotamia, these early rulers were not merely long-lived men, they were the shepherds of humanity, in an age before the cosmic order was broken. Alulim's reign would have seen the stars shift in the sky, the landscape alter, and generations of subjects rise and fall like grass in the wind, all while he remained seated on the throne of Eridu, a static, eternal point of authority. He was followed by Alalgar, who ruled for another 36,000 years, 2 kings, 1 city, and a span of time that stretches back further than the last ice age. The narrative of the King List moves with a rhythmic, hypnotic cadence, traveling from city to city as the kingship is transferred, often by force or divine decree. Eridu fell and the kingship was taken to Bad Tibira. This transfer is not a minor bureaucratic detail. It is a seismic shift in the spiritual geography of the ancient world. In Bad Tibira, the reign lengths grow even more staggering. Enmenluana takes the throne and holds it for 40,200 years, the longest reign of any monarch in the list. It is a number that feels astronomical, mathematical in its precision, and terrifying in its scale. These numbers are likely based on the Sumerian sexagesimal system, a base 60 mathematics that governed their clocks and their degrees, suggesting these ages were calculated cycles of cosmic time rather than biological years. Yet, to the scribe, they represented a perfection that the modern world had lost. Then there is Dumuzid, the shepherd. He rules Bad Tibira for 36,000 years. Unlike the enigmatic Alulim, Dumuzid is a figure who bleeds into other myths, known as the lover of Inanna, the queen of heaven. He is a tragic figure in wider mythology, a god who dies and rises with the seasons. But here in the list, he is a king of flesh and blood, anchoring the city for millennia. The list continues, naming Ensipad Zid Anna of Larag, who ruled for 28,800 years, and Enmendur Anna of Zimbir, who reigned for 21,000 years. Finally, the kingship moves to Shurupak, the city of the last king of this era, Ubara Tutu, who ruled for 18,600 years. 5 cities, 8 kings, a grand total of 241 years of unbroken sovereignty. This was the Golden Age, a time of giants, where the connection between the gods and the earth was a thick, unbreakable chain. And then, the chain snapped. The scribe's stylus digs deep into the clay to carve the most devastating sentence in the entire text. A line that marks the end of the antediluvian world and the beginning of a new, harsher reality. The flood swept over. There is no elaboration on the tragedy in the list itself, no description of the ark, the animals, or the drowning masses, because the scribe assumes the reader already knows. This is the cataclysm that reset humanity. It is the dividing line of history. The 241 years of the 8 kings were washed away in a deluge of mud and silence. The great cities of Eridu and Bad Tibira were submerged, their divine rulers gone, the perfect order shattered by the wrath of Enlil. When the waters receded, the world that emerged was different. It was broken, diminished, and mortal. After the flood had swept over and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. This repetition of the opening phrase signals a restart. But the atmosphere has changed. The reigns of the kings of Kish are still long by modern standards. 200 years, 960 years, but they are a fraction of the antediluvian giants. The silence of the gods has begun to set in. The lifespan of the rulers is decaying, spiraling down from the tens of thousands into centuries, and eventually into the span of a normal human life. This degradation of time is the central tragedy of the Sumerian King List. It tells the story of humanity moving further and further away from the divine source, becoming more frail, more temporal, and more alone in the universe. Among the post-flood kings, the text begins to weave in names that we can almost touch, figures that stand on the threshold between myth and history. We encounter Etana of Kish, the shepherd, who the list tells us ascended to heaven and consolidated all the foreign countries. He ruled for 1,560 years. Etana is the first human hero, a man who desperately sought the plant of birth to provide an heir, flying on the back of an eagle to the gates of the gods. Yet, he is followed by names that archaeologists have actually found scratched onto bowl fragments and temple dedications. Enmebaragesi, king of Kish, is listed as ruling for 900 years, but we know he existed. We have his inscriptions. He is the anchor that drags the list from the clouds of mythology down into the bedrock of reality. As the list progresses, the numbers continue to plummet. We reach the city of Uruk, and the name that echoes loudest through the corridors of history, Gilgamesh. The King List credits him with a reign of 126 years, extraordinary, but human. Gilgamesh is the pivot point. He is the hero who realized that he could not live forever, the king who built the great walls of Uruk to achieve immortality through stone rather than breath. By the time the scribe reaches the kings of his own era, or the era immediately preceding him, the reigns are perfectly normal. 6 years, 20 years, 30 years. The gods have retreated to the sky, leaving men to govern themselves in the mud. But why was this document written? Why blend the impossible with the political? The answer lies in the geopolitical chaos of the time. The Sumerian King List was not a history textbook. It was a weapon of propaganda. In the period around 2000 to 1800 BC, Mesopotamia was a patchwork of warring city-states, Eson, Larsa, Babylon, each vying for supremacy. The concept of one kingship was a powerful political tool. The list argues that there is only ever one legitimate capital at a time. By tracing the lineage from Eridu to the present day, the scribe was effectively saying to the rivals of his patron, "We are the inheritors of Alulim. We are the successors of the flood survivors. Our rule is not a seizure of power. It is the natural order of the cosmos." The physical reality of the Weld-Blundell Prism itself tells a story of survival. Discovered during the 1922 expedition led by Herbert Weld-Blundell, it was found in Larsa, buried in the ruins of a civilization that had long since turned to dust. When the archaeologists brushed away the earth, they were looking at a document that attempted to organize the chaos of thousands of years into a single, coherent narrative. The prism has 4 sides, each covered in 2 columns of text, written with a precision that suggests it was a formal copy, perhaps for a temple library or a royal archive. It survived the collapse of Larsa, the rise of Babylon, the invasions of the Persians and Greeks, and the slow, grinding erosion of the desert winds to end up in a glass case in England, bearing silent witness to the Sumerian longing for eternity. We must also consider what the years actually meant. Scholars have debated for decades whether the 2800 years of Alulim were symbolic, a code, or a misunderstanding of units. Some argue that the numbers represent lunar cycles rather than solar years, which would drastically reduce the time frames, though still leaving them impossibly long. Others suggest they are purely numerological, tied to the sacred number 60 and the mathematical obsession of the Babylonian priesthood. But perhaps the most compelling interpretation is that the numbers were meant to convey quality rather than quantity. In the ancient mind, a long reign was a good reign. To say a king ruled for 43,000 years was to say he was the ultimate stabilizer, a force of such profound order that time itself seemed to stand still in his presence. The structure of the list also reveals a deep psychological need to connect the present with the deep past. Every culture has its golden age, its Garden of Eden, its Satya Yuga. For the Sumerians, this was the time before the flood. The list serves as a bridge over the trauma of that catastrophe. By stating that kingship descended again from heaven after the flood, the text assures the people that the connection to the gods was damaged, but not severed. The current king, despite his short life and human frailty, is still part of that same rope that stretches back to Eridu. It legitimizes the current social order by rooting it in the bedrock of the Antediluvian world. There is a tragic beauty in the final sections of the list. As the rains become realistic, the entries become drier, more factual. The magic evaporates. We see lists of usurpers, periods of chaos where the text asks, who was king, who was not king? This reflects the turbulent reality of Mesopotamian history, where cities were sacked and dynasties extinguished in blood. The contrast between the 36,000-year reign of Alalgar and the chaotic one-year reigns of later kings highlights the Sumerian view of history as a process of entropy. Things are not getting better. They are getting worse. The further we move from the moment the gods handed down the crown, the more unstable the world becomes. The geography mentioned in the list provides a ghostly map of the region. Eridu, now a wind-swept mound of sand called Tel Abu Shahrain, was once a lush paradise on the edge of the Persian Gulf, where fresh water mingled with the salt sea. Bad Tibira, the wall of the copper workers, remains largely unexcavated, a mystery sleeping beneath the silt. Shuropak, the city of the final pre-flood king, has yielded tablets describing the administrative life of a bustling city, unaware that it was destined to become the focal point of the world's most enduring cataclysm myth. Standing at these sites today, with the wind howling through the broken ziggurats, one can almost hear the echo of the 241,200 years. It is a landscape that demands a mythology of giants. The legacy of the Sumerian King List extends far beyond the clay it is written on. It influenced the biblical genealogies found in Genesis, where the patriarchs from Adam to Noah are also attributed immensely long lifespans, 900 years, 800 years, before a flood wipes the slate clean and lifespans shorten to the 70 of modern man. This parallel is not a coincidence, it is a cultural inheritance. The Hebrew scribes, writing during the Babylonian exile, were immersed in these Mesopotamian traditions. The idea that in the beginning, men were closer to God and lived longer is a shared heritage of the Near East, preserved first in the clay of the Weld-Blundell Prism. In the end, the Sumerian King List is more than a list of names and numbers. It is a desperate assertion of order in a chaotic universe. It is a document that tries to scream, "We matter," into the void of history. The scribe who wrote it knew that his king would die, that his city might fall, and that he himself would return to the clay from which he was made. But by carving the names of Alulim and Gilgamesh, by linking the moment of now with the 241 years of then, he built a different kind of immortality. He created a lineage that could not be broken by war or famine. When we look at the prism today, we are not just seeing an administrative record. We are looking at the human capacity for myth-making. We are seeing the refusal to accept that we are merely biological accidents. We want to believe that once, long ago, we walked with giants, that we ruled for eons, and that we are the inheritors of a kingship that came from the stars. The verified facts tell us it is propaganda. The carbon dating tells us it is from 1800 BC. But the narrative, the story of the 8 kings and the flood, tells us something profound about the human soul. We are creatures of memory, constantly looking back to a horizon we can never reach, remembering a time when we were gods.